Hey everybody, and welcome to the Mastery Series and this special lesson on setting your stops. In fact, we've titled this particular lesson, Stop the Madness. Why? Because setting stops is such an important component of being a great trader, and yet a lot of people just don't understand how to set stops. So let me tell you what we're going to look at in this series of lessons today. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about an introduction to stops so you get a basic understanding of how stops work. Next, we're going to look at the different types of stop orders. And then we're going to talk about setting your stops, kind of the more traditional way. And then finally, we're going to get into the bulk of the last half of it here, which is focused on systems for placing stops. And then finally, we'll talk about automating some of your stop management. It's going to be a great lesson, so let's get started with an introduction into stops. You know, one of the most important questions we have to ask is, why do we use stops? And the answer is simple. Number one, it's to protect our capital. Realize as a trader, our capital is everything we've got. If we let our capital go, we don't have anything left to play with, so we got to go raise some more capital. And so it's so important that we learn to protect our capital, and the stop order is one of the critical tools that we can use to protect that capital. But it's not just about protecting capital. It's also about establishing a known risk. You know, there's certain amounts of risk that happen in every type of trading. In fact, there's a certain amount of risk in everything in life. But when it comes to trading, there's a certain amount of risk that is inherently built into it. Ironically, most people don't plan for that risk, and consequently, they might place one trade and lose everything, not because the trade was necessarily horrible, not because they're horrible, or because the market's horrible, but simply they did not know how to manage their risk. And so the setting of stops is really important for protecting our capital and for establishing a way to establish a known risk with each trade. And finally, the most important reason maybe of all is to protect us from ourselves, to help us manage our emotions. You know, more trades are messed up simply because we get in our own way. Our emotions are so overwhelming sometimes in our trades, and it takes over, and consequently, we'll make bad trading decisions, or maybe we'll close a trade early, or, you know, bail on a trade a little too early, not give it time to play out, and consequently what happens is we make these emotional decisions, and that can cost us a lot of capital and increase our risk in the market. So setting stops helps us to establish a way to protect the capital, establish a known risk, and also help us manage our own emotions in the trade. Let's take a look at this example over here and notice that, you know, Halliburton has sold off and we're starting to establish a support level down here. So if you take a trade like this, you might look at it establishing support and you're thinking, this is my trade. This is the one that's going to go up. This is going to make me a lot of money. You know, in fact, if I look at it, I think it could go up $20 or $30 a share. And so what do? You go out and you buy a few hundred shares of Halliburton, and then what happens? Almost as though they're watching for you specifically, the trade starts to sell off. As soon as you buy, maybe 1 or 2 days it's up, and then it starts selling off. And before you know it, we're all the way down here, $38 a share, maybe $40 a share, and all that joy, all that elation has turned to laughter, into tears, and maybe panic, and who knows what the emotions are at that point. How many of you can identify with that? Unfortunately, if you've ever traded the market, you can certainly identify with that. Well, what stops do is they help us eliminate some of that unknown risk in the market. They help us put some boundaries on this trade so it can only go so far against us. If we'd had a stop set in here, we could have put an order in here that would say, hey, if I get down to this price, sell my trade. Consequently, one day the trade would be up, we might be feeling good, but if the trade turned around and it started to go against us, that order would tell our broker, sell my position, get me out of the trade, I don't want to go down with the ship. That's the benefit of a stop order. Let's talk about the different ways that we want to place a stop. There's really only two ways. In a bullish trade, we're always going to place the stop below the price. In a bullish trade, we want the stock to go higher, so consequently, we want to get out of the trade if it's going down, so our stop price is going to go below the price of the stock. In a bearish trade, it's the exact opposite. In a bearish trade, we want the stock to go down, so we're going to put the stop order above the price of the stock. Consequently, if the stock turns against us and it goes bad, it will stop us out of the trade. So in a bearish trade, the stop is set above the price, and in a bullish trade, the stop is placed below the price. Let's take a look over here at a bullish trade here on Guild. You notice that the stock has come down to about $100 a share, and it started to establish a support level. And so you jump into it, you buy maybe 100 shares thinking this trade's going to go higher, and it starts to go higher, but we put our stop right below our support level in here just in case the trade does come down. That would be the warning that we want to avoid here. We want to avoid the stock going against us here. In a bearish trade, we maybe go into a bearish trade here around 87.50. You're expecting for the bears to continue. You're expecting to trade this thing lower, but we put our stop in here above the price of the stock just in case the stock comes back down.